Here we are on the 2nd of January 2026, and building more homes in Surrey likely to be one of the big stories over the next 12 months.
I personally feel that, we should be prioritising literally everything else that is not green before we start looking at Greenbelt, because for me is what we should be doing for our future generations.
That's Anya Milewski, whose family have lived in the village of Claygate for 35 years. She and other residents are worried about a plan to build 2,000 homes over the London border at Chessington. The development, known as Hook Park, would also see a new park and office and retail units on Greenbelt land. Anya says she's worried about the impact of a new neighbourhood next to the village.
In Claygate, the population has increased exponentially. So now we've got a doctor's surgery, and I think the population of Claygate is around 7,000. That's increased a huge amount, and we still have one doctor's surgery serving that population. So I think, all of the services are already under pressure. Having another neighbourhood, a lot more thought needs to be put into these sorts of proposals rather than, just saying, well, we've got the space, we're going to put the homes on there.
Well, the application for these new homes has been sent to both Kingston and Elmbridge Borough Councils. Anthony Shepherd is the chair of the planning committee at Claygate Parish Council.
We have formally objected to Kingston, and we are also submitting a slightly abbreviated copy of our objections, mainly with the traffic stuff, to Elmbridge. There are serious problems with accessing that site. At the one end, it opened. At present, the only access is from Clayton Road, which is an extremely narrow road, congested with parked cars most of the time. So the developers are proposing to make a new roundabout access onto the A309 slip, which poses quite a few problems. The other issues we had were the design and density of the development. I mean, we think it's just too big. But also, they're present proposing a row of 8-storey mansion blocks all along the A3. And I think we felt that just on the edge of a conurbation, it gives a sort of fortress-like appearance.
Well, before Christmas, the government announced new planning rules to speed up new housing, including development on Greenbelt land in certain circumstances. There would also be default approvals for homes around rail stations and high-rise developments in towns and cities. Matthew Pennycock is the Labour Housing Minister.
They will not be without their critics, both in this House and in the country. But in the face of a housing crisis that has become a genuine emergency in many parts of England, we will act where previous governments have failed, to ensure a decent, safe, secure and affordable home is the right of all working people rather than a privilege enjoyed only by some.
Just bring in Ian Davidson from the Residents Against Hook Park group. Good morning to you, Ian.
Morning, James. Thanks for having me.
Well, look, you live in Chessington, the Chessington end of this development. Talk me through your main concerns about it.
Yeah, we've basically got three areas of concern, I think. One is the scale and design of the project. The second one is traffic-related issues. And then the third one is the impact on the environment. So if I just go look at the scale of this thing, we're talking about up to 6,800 residents. So that would increase the population of Chessington by around 35% in one fell swoop. Obviously, that would put huge additional pressure on existing services, the existing infrastructure, which is already very overstretched. By that, I mean schools, hospitals, GPs, dentists, and all the utilities, water, power and electricity that supply the area. And in addition to that, the design that's being proposed is largely 8-storey mansion blocks, which is completely out of character with the existing area, which is predominantly, 98% is 2-storey homes. These mansion blocks would have a huge impact on privacy of existing residents. There'd be a lot more noise generated, light pollution, because they're being placed very close to the existing housing. You then look at the potential impact on traffic. With 2,000 homes, just based on the average UK car ownership, you're going to have in excess of probably 2,500 cars, which adds a couple of thousand journeys per day to local roads. Now, the site itself is bound on one side by the A3. You then have the A309 bypass on the other side of it, and you have residential roads of Woodstock Lane South, Clayton Road. These are all heavily congested roads, and we are notionally inside an ULEZ zone, so increasing pollution just seems to be crazy in that sense. And then you've got the problem that local transport, public transport connections are not that great. Chessington Station, for example, has one train every 30 minutes. They're always overcrowded. They're often cancelled at short notice. And then the final traffic issue is that the developers are proposing 0.4 parking spaces per residence. So what will happen is a massive overspill of cars onto surrounding residential roads, which causes problems both in terms of congestion but also safety for pedestrians.
It always seems a bit bizarre, that whole sort of 0.4 per household, doesn't it? Or whatever you just said it was. It's just mad. Yeah. But look, talk me through I want to mention the company Poppy Mill Limited say that the site near the A3, it's degraded low-value land and has also previously been developed. They're arguing that it's much-needed new homes. What do you make of that argument?
I think the issue, the land itself is designated by Kingston Borough Council as Greenbelt, and we do see a lot of wildlife there. There's just yesterday, day before, we filmed from one of our windows, we filmed a family of deer in the field, and we've seen those around for many years. Different families of deer use the field. There's lots of, we believe there are badgers in the field. They've been seen there. Plenty of wildlife. It's a big open space on the very edge of a large developed conurbation. So it's scarce local greenbelt that we have here. There's precious little of it around here, and it's certainly worth preserving.
Look, it's interesting what we're hearing from the government. Clearly there is a sort of just get on and build attitude coming. Do you think it's a fight you guys can win?
Well, we can only try, can't we? You mentioned local government. It's quite interesting that over the sort of current governments and previous governments have pushed a lot for decentralisation of decision making and rolling decisions down to the local area. But it seems to me that on housing, local residents are being increasingly ignored, both by the Secretary of State and by the Mayor. Surely it's local councils that are in a better position to decide what's appropriate for their residents and for their area in terms of planning.
Well, look, great talking to you. Appreciate you coming on. This is a story that I have no doubt we'll speak again on, and we'll be talking about planning over the next 12 months, very definitely. We did ask to speak to the developers, Poppy Mill Limited. There was no one available. They told us that Hook Park is a transformational development for Chessington and would create a multi-generational community, and that a third of the homes will be family-sized, 50% are earmarked as affordable. We're going to hear more about what they have to say with our political reporter later on in the show. And you can read more on the story right now if you go to bbc.co.uk/Surrey. If you've got a new phone or a tablet and you've got the BBC News app, thoroughly recommend that you actually register, and it means you put your postcode in and you get the stories relevant to wherever you're from. So if you're in Hampshire, you'll get the Hampshire stories. If BBC Radio Surrey did ask to speak to the developers Poppy Mill Limited, but no one is available. Here's BBC Radio Surrey's political reporter Jack Feen to get more details on what they are saying.
Well, James, they've described Hook Park as a transformational development for Chessington. As we've heard, there's going to be more than 2,000 homes. I'm told that a third of these will be family-sized, 50% will be defined as affordable. I know there's a debate about what affordable means, but that's what the developers are saying. They say, as well as the homes, there will be a public park, there'll be offices, retail and commercial units, so more shops and things like that. They say that the project team over a period of 5 years has consulted extensively with the community and the council on proposals and provided extensive reports on how Hook Park will benefit the wider community and not hinder it. They've also commented that the site is enclosed by the A3, and so they say it's a degraded and previously developed in part site. It's low value land is the way they've described it. And they'll say that it'll provide much needed new homes, public open space and community uses that deliver lasting public benefits and meet local housing needs.
What about these traffic concerns?
Yeah, well, the developers say that there is going to be investment in the surrounding transport network. For example, a new Kingston bypass access. They say that will draw the traffic away from Clayton Road, where a managed filter will prevent the through traffic, these rat runs that the residents have been concerned about. They say that the layout also promotes walking and cycling and public transport, and there's going to be more bus services. There's going to be a community shuttle to Chessington North Station. And they say they'll continue to keep the community updated on the proposals as they move forwards with the decisions from Kingston Council and Elmbridge Borough Council.
Well, that's Jack Feen.